So this panel, this session, we have with us Piotr Markielau. So Piotr is going to talk about the situation in Belarus, the protests that took place this summer, and it's something that's very important because in a way we see what is the actual price to be paid for freedom. So Piotr is a journalist, a drug policy activist. He's been active with European Students for Liberty. He's been also active in the struggle in Belarus, and he has paid a personal cost for this participation. So, as a nice poem line of a Greek poet says, freedom requires virtue and daring. So I assume we'll see Piotr in... Yeah, here he is. Hi again, Piotr. Nice to see you. And let's hear what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Hi, Nikos. Yeah, thanks for inviting. Thanks also to Mirella for all of that work. Yeah, I'm sorry from the start if I have any connection troubles. I might disconnect because internet is not working really well in Belarus these days. Every Sunday, the government actually blocks the internet. Today is Tuesday, not Sunday, so it should be better. We'll see. So indeed, many people who are interested in politics might have seen, news coming from Belarus in the last months. And today marks the 65th day of the protests that actually started on the 9th of August after another rigged presidential election, where Lukashenko announced his win with more than 80% of votes, which is absolutely not true. So it's another rigged election, but this time the protests are different from usual. Because Belarus was established as an independent state in 1991, and in 1994, when I was born, I'm 25 now. When I was born in this year, Lukashenko was elected as a president for the first time, and it was the only fair election in Belarus. And since then, every election is faked, is rigged. Lukashenko has all of his power, has merged all the branches of power in one hand, and rules the country in an extremely authoritarian way, especially these days. So why is this protest different from usual? It is indeed different. There are just many factors. Of course, coronavirus is one of the main factors here, and the deep economic crisis that Belarus and also the world is facing and is experiencing. So the protest started on the 9th of August, but then in a week, Belarus saw the biggest gathering of ever, with more than 200,000 people on the street. And what actually triggered this massive gathering? It is not the rigged election. It is the violence that was used by the police and tortures that were used by the police in the first days of the protest. It's also interesting to mention that some people like to call this revolution. I mean, revolution is something that has an end. This is still a protest. So some people want to call it a women's revolution because many leaders or people who are on the streets, people who lead the protest are women today. Why? I think the main reason for this is that the majority of people who are arrested and beaten and detained are men. Like 96% of people hospitalized in the first days of the protest are men. And then, but maybe the majority of people who were going on the streets these days were men. But then still, there were women's marches organized, and on these marches, the police at the start only detained men, and they left women at large. So this is for the name of this revolution. It's just a beautiful name, a women's revolution, but I wouldn't put too much meaning or in this. It's just like a cool name and a cool image. So as for the numbers, for today we have around, I would say, 15 to 20,000 people who were arrested. I mean, they are arrested and then they are released in like 2 weeks after spending some time in prison. And the main thing people demand is, of course, it's just straightforward. Is Lukashenko's resign and a new election, a new and free election. So this is the introduction to what is happening to Belarus. It is really different from what we had before, because now the protests continue, and the big march is happening every Sunday. I went to all of these protests, and the last Sunday was the first time when I actually couldn't manage to join the main crowd of people, because the government, they were dispersing everyone from the start brutally, and also hundreds were detained this Sunday. And I think starting from Sunday and yesterday, we have another sort of escalation, because Lukashenko, some people say that Russia actually made put a time frame on this protest, and said to Lukashenko that if the protest is will be alive for more than 2 months, we'll need to replace you, something like this. But these are, of course, just anecdotal reports. But what is for sure is that Russia has and has always had a great influence on Belarus. And so like in the first days of the protest, when many journalists from the state television resigned, the government invited Russian journalists from Russia Today and affiliated media to work in Belarus. Russian journalists are allowed to be on the protest and not detained, because these days independent journalists are getting just arrested, which is quite new even for Belarus. Media are deprived of accreditation, so I would say that the majority, it's for sure the majority of Belarusian media today are out of law, because they were withdrawn with accreditation. So journalists work at their own risk, without any accreditation, without any sort of legal right to be on the streets, while Russian journalists can still do it, because they are Russian journalists. I mean, if they are from the state media or state-affiliated media. Also, we see that the government of Belarus has openly rejected the multilateral policy that they were aligning to, for about 25 years. Now because they want Russia to support them. Lukashenko wants Putin to support its regime, but we also know that Putin doesn't really like Lukashenko, because Lukashenko is very he acts like how to say, like a businessman, in a meaning that he's not a friend. He just wants money and support from Russia, and in exchange he can give some words in public about the Belarusian Russian brotherhood and stuff like this. This is as for Russian involvement, what are the prospects of this? It's actually also very hard to discuss, because nobody actually expected the political change in power to come very soon, after the election, because in authoritarian regimes the election is not a thing to change the power, but it was a reason, a cause. It was something to be a start. Some people were saying that Lukashenko will go before the new year. Today we have mid-October, still some time left, more than 2 months. And some people say that Lukashenko will go in a year. It's really a thing that is developing, and it also depends a lot on Russia, because Russia can just simply give money to the government of Belarus to support the police, because the police is earning a lot these days, like thousands of dollars a month, which is very big number for Belarus, where people can earn like $200 in a village. So they just buying this just gangs, to beat and kill and torture peaceful protesters. And the protest was peaceful, mostly, and only in the recent. I mean, in the beginning after the election, there were a few sort of street kind of, I wouldn't call it battles, but at least some provocations from the protesters when they put some plastic road fences, which are not meant to be a part of a barricade, which are just very soft and light and are just for. But if you look at it, it is a provocation. And what we see in the last days, yesterday and the day before yesterday, is that people start to burn tires, which is quite. I mean, yeah, they started to burn tires. They started to build these barricades, block streets, and the government, the police, exerts violence similar to what they actually did in the first day after the election. So they beat people up. Many people hospitalized. They use rubber bullets. They use grenades, petards, fireworks, flash grenades, and stuff like this. Yeah, I mean, do you have any? Because I'm staying in Belarus because of the coronavirus for a lot of months now, and I'm a bit in this bubble. So maybe you, Nikos, know what is interesting that I missed. That will be Nikos, you are muted. Nikos, you are muted.
Sorry. Yes, I have a question. So, and in a way, they also enter the kind of personal thing. So, you had some experience with the repressive elements of the regime. So, do you want to tell us a bit more about that? And also, that's a general question. Is it as scary? No, that's not the way to put it. But put differently, my mother was imprisoned by the Greek dictatorship in the 70s, and she participated in the revolt. And knowing her, I always think, oh my God, how brave must it have been to risk being arrested, being tortured, because that would be part of being arrested by the dictatorship, and maybe worse. So tell us a bit about your experience with the agents of the repressive regime, and also how you view things after that. Do you feel in a way more scared or more liberated? Like, it wasn't. Now I'm more determined. Because why I'm asking, the regime, I assume the reason they do this is because they want to scare people, obviously. But also this has a very bad downside to them, which is it's horrible PR. It's horrible PR if the whole world knows that you are terrorizing your own people, you are arresting them, and also you are treating them badly. So does it work anymore for the Lukashenko regime?
Yeah, they don't care about anything except for keeping the power these days. Because we have now an unprecedented events that are happening when the leaders of European countries do not accept Lukashenko as the president, when the Europe and other states put sanctions on the regime, when many ambassadors were withdrawn from Belarus, were sent back, and same for Belarusian ambassadors in other countries. We have a big wave of firings of governmental officials who did not agree with the violence and publicly supported, stopping the violence. And the law does not work in Belarus at all. At all, they do what they want, and it's just if you see these pictures, if you Google, you'll see just people in balaclavas with guns, sometimes even without a uniform. Usually, they are just gangs. It looks like a gang, and they are a gang. There are a number of these gangs different departments of the Ministry of Interior and other special forces, and they just driving, military vehicles in the city with these government flags, going around the city with guns, and they beating up people they want, and nobody has any possibility to defend themselves in a trial or something. They just do what they want, and that's just true. And also people who experience violent crimes from other citizens of Belarus, they can't actually get the services that police actually should provide. They are not, their rights are not protected by the police. So if someone steals your phone, you won't get support from the police because the police is busy with beating and arresting the peaceful demonstrants. And everyone is now angry at them because really the majority, because everyone sees what they do, and that's why they are hiding their faces with balaclavas, because then we have some channels on messengers and on social media that actually post the personal data of those policemen that are involved in these tortures and beatings, and then their cars got burned, the dachas, summer houses got burned. Because this is the people hunger. It's a very similar. It's very close to become a civic war, because yesterday one of the top Ministry of Interior officials said that if the peaceful protest, is continuing, we will use weapon, like fire weapon, not the rubber bullet, but the kind of real bullets. That's what he said. And this is
so many questions here, but okay, where to begin? One question has to do with the Russian element. So in the minds of most people, probably for good reason, that's another discussion, Russia usually in this case is the bad guy, right? Bad influence, whatever, intervening in elections, whatever. But the special situation with Belarus is that actually many people in Belarus consider Russia like a brother country. In a way, for example, like, I don't know, Greece and Cyprus. So we kind of consider each other one. So how does this complicate things? And up to what point is Lukashenko's, let's say, popularity part of the fact that he's considered like this, our guy who is close to Russia, as opposed to these people in the West who are the bad people and they want to take us away from our brothers, the Russians?
Yeah, even people who support Lukashenko. So a few weeks ago, I met a man. He was just walking down the street with the governmental flag, the official flag of Belarus. And I approached and asked him about his opinion on certain things. And he said that he's not supporting the violence, and he's not supporting Belarus to be part of Russia. So even those who support Lukashenko, and the majority of Belarusians, they want to see Belarus an independent, sovereign state. And yeah, this is true. So even if people treat Russians as brothers, which is very natural because we speak, like the majority of Belarusians speak Russian language, and in Russia they also speak Russian. So it's very natural that there is a feeling of this brotherhood, and also because because of the Soviet past. But nobody actually wants in Belarus. Very few people want Belarus to become part of Russia. It's actually been very interesting about Russia and about Russian opposition, and just about people of Russia who see what is happening in Belarus and who actually trying to project the situation on Russia and think of and become inspired. And I think Putin doesn't want to see this protest in Belarus for a number of reasons. Also because he wants to keep Belarus in its orbit, Also, he doesn't want to send military troops to Belarus because it would completely spoil his image. So he wants a friendly president that is accepted at least by the citizens of Belarus.
Yeah, so he doesn't want.
Yes.
They want to see it as they saw, for example, the situation in Georgia or Russian imperialism and stuff. Anyway, I have more questions on that, but let's, on a slightly different note, we have a very interesting question from the audience. So there are two reasons why we've heard a lot about Belarus in the last months. The one is obviously the struggle and the revolt. The other is that it was one of the two countries that didn't go full into lockdown modes, which was very interesting because you'd expect an authoritarian regime to jump into that. So I think in Belarus, I think there was a time that it was the only football league in Europe that was going on. So suddenly, those of us who couldn't live without football, we were following to see who's going to win the league in Belarus. So the question is, can you tell us a little about the cases of COVID in Belarus? What kind of measures have the government taken? And then a follow-up question on that. There are several epidemiologists who support the Belarusian model of the pandemic. So have you got any comments on that, Piotr?
I do support the Belarusian model of the pandemic response because it is just based on on some sort of on the principle of liberty, and it actually worked in Belarus. Lukashenko is stupid. Lukashenko rejected the coronavirus. He said absolutely stupid things, on the TV, and there was no order from the top. There was no ruling to introduce a lockdown. But what worked is that just people's responsibility and people who are in power on the local level, people who are in power at just everywhere, like at city administration, they introduced measures themselves without governmental ruling. I mean, they even used different ways to do it. For example, in the first days of the pandemic, when they wanted to close some bars, they just sent people who are like just basically checking it's called the epidemiological service, but it's not just for the viruses, it's for everything, for water, and if your tile on the floor is broken, it's already a violation. So, and they used this to close the bar. I mean, and the owners of the bar were actually okay with this. So this what happened is that this grassroots response to the pandemic that worked in Belarus. Why? Because Belarus has a lot of bets. We have a legacy of the Soviet Union and the Soviet centralized system, this centralized system of hospitals. So we have a lot of these bets. And yes, and people were, and it was almost enough, and there wasn't a dramatic, number of deaths because of lack of care beds. And also, of course, people were taking measures. They were washing hands. They were trying to stay at home. So even without the lockdown, in the first when it all started in March, it started in March in Belarus. People, like the revenue of bars and cafes dropped by 90%. So it means that 90% people decided to stay at home, not to go to the cafe without any lockdown. We can talk a lot why it is so in Belarus, but we don't have many cases of other countries to compare. Unfortunately, yes. So yeah, and so I think
to put it a bit in Austrian terms, the spontaneous order in Hayekian terms worked. So people were not ordered to stay at home, but of course they use their chances. Yes, till we figure out what's happening. Yeah, let's stay.
Yeah, this is how free society, open society should work. People are responsible. People don't want to die. People don't want their friends to die and their relatives. So they take these measures, and there is no need for government to keep people alive in this way, in the way of lockdown. The government can educate, with what was not done in Belarus. The government of Belarus rejected the existence of coronavirus. There was very little public information available about the danger of coronavirus for the elderly, for the group of risks. So this is, of course, a problem of the authoritarian regime. But in other countries where this educational activities can be implemented because the state is democratic, I think it's a good practice. Yeah.
So one last question that I have for you is, you've been involved in campaigns for some time. As we said, you've been active with European Students for Liberty. So, but I guess the stakes were never as high as this time. So if you can figure out one thing that you've learned through this campaign, something that made you wiser, let's say as a freedom fighter, campaigner, organizer, however you want to call it. So what was the big takeaway of the last months for you?
Last month, yeah, as I'm a known activist in Belarus, active for years, they know me, so I'm trying to restrain from calling people on the streets or stuff like this, or even participating online. I mean, just showing online on social media that I'm just taking an active part, because if I do, I will be immediately caught by my door and imprisoned. So I'm trying to be a bit behind the scenes, help in a way I can, because and also let a way for people who did not participate in any protest movement before to go on the streets, to maybe be a bit radical sometimes, because just activists are targeted these days. But what I've learned from just the Students for Liberty in general and for the campaigning, that you need to sometimes think of yourself and take care of yourself. And because there's not a lot of good things you can actually do in prison. You can read, you can exercise. It's funny for a week, for two, new experiences. People love it. But when it continues for months, it's just time that you lost. Time that, maybe not lost completely, but you are in freedom. You are not free completely, and this is not a good feeling and condition.
That's an honest answer. Well, last thing, Piotr, very quickly before we go, people who want to help, find out more, where would you direct them?
About what?
About the situation in Belarus.
We see that many international media often publish reports about Belarus, just Google it.
Good. So, Piotr, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for your whole action for promoting freedom and for realizing how high the stakes are and the risk you're going through. So, hope everything's going to be fine. Hope next time we have a real event, we'll have overpassed the pandemic. No authoritarian. Maybe who knows? Students for Liberty or something event in Belarus one day, not in the so distant future.
I hope this time will come soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting.